Hey, it's Josh and Alicia here with the Herp and Harbins, and we are actually now 15 minutes of lane contestants this year, and we are now going over some marketing strategy with some business leaders, or business industry leaders. Today, we're actually talking to Shawn with RGI or Rare Genetics Inc. about the progression of their business and marketing changes that they've gone through. So, y'all, welcome, Shawn.
Hey, Shawn.
Hey, y'all. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Thank you.
Please
Thanks
forgive the messy basement in the background, but I'd rather do these from home than from the lab because there are people walking behind me the whole time and it's distracting. So,
gotcha. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, we're good.
Be sure and let the Texas people you work with know what the proper orange is. This is clearly what the orange is.
Yeah, when you say around here, it's not that color orange. I can tell you that. So I'm a red, black, and white fan, not an orange fan.
Okay. We'll accept that. That's okay. No big deal.
Recently in the news for one of our ball boys being mean to the Colorado Bulldogs, I guess. So.
Oh my. Well, there's always something. There's always drama going on in there. So. But.
All right. So what are we talking about?
Well, we're going to focus tonight on some marketing. A lot of people in this industry are talking about the snakes, And,
okay.
This revolves around the snakes, but it's like, how do you market yourself? And what have you done as a company? So I guess the chip shot question is like, what got you started in the reptile industry?
Oh boy. I mean, I'm 54 years old this year. So long story short, I mean, I've been into reptiles my whole life, catching corn snakes when I was a kid in South Florida, that whole thing, fishing for bluegill and watching out for alligators, the whole 9 yards. And long before the internet, I was just that nerd who was always in the library, taking out every book I could find on reptiles and reading everything and learning. And I got, to be the only 10 or 11 or 12-year-old kid in the neighborhood who knew everything about every snake that ever turned up in the neighborhood, to the point where the local parents would be like, call that kid and tell him to come over here and tell us if it's venomous or not. So it just evolved from there. I actually started my own, I want to say it was an import business, but that's not really true. I purchased stuff from the old Bushmaster fax list back in the late 80s and early 90s. And then I would throw all of these things into my bedroom in the best caging that I had at the time, which was usually aquariums. And once every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd load up all of my inventory and I'd drive all over the state of Texas, New Mexico, a little bit of Louisiana, and go door to door pet store selling everything from skinks to I actually imported a dwarf caiman once and sold it to a pet store. So it's a little embarrassing to say that, but back then the industry was very different. I mean, I remember importing ball pythons, 100, 200 at a time and seeing pastels and xanthics, and I had no idea what they were. So it's very ironic that I look back in my history in this industry, and now I'm in the genetic testing business. And back in the day when I had all these animals, I had no idea what I had, and I had no idea that I could reproduce them predictably. And because, I didn't know. None of us knew.
Nobody knew. Yeah, nobody really understood it.
Yeah. And it just sort of evolved. I turned into a breeder. I got very into carpet pythons, and which are still my favorite species today. Australian species in particular, but carpets are my favorite of the Australian species. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Good deal.
Do you still keep anything right now? Do you have anything that you breed or keep?
I do. So I still have probably 45 or 50 carpet pythons and a few ball pythons. I have I have lots of animals that are over 20 years old now. I haven't bred anything in about 8 years. I got a divorce 9 years ago, and I moved out to the country, built a farm, and I built the house that I always wanted to have that had dedicated snake rooms and dedicated aquarium rooms. And so, now I have the place that, I've wanted my. Hear me? Am I still there? Okay, good.
Yes, you're good.
So I was able to build, my little hobby farm, which is really all it is. I call it a farm, but I raise chickens because it's fun, and ducks because it's fun, and snakes because it's fun, and fish because it's fun. And, I may even try some monitor lizards because the weather here is pretty nice most of the year. So
that's kind of handy. So yeah. What changed it into you doing? Let's go into RGI, Rare Genetics Inc. And when did that start, and what flipped the switch for you to move that direction?
So many years ago, before social media, there's a website called moreliapythons.com. It's a forum site that kind of everyone who really was into green trees, carpet pythons, would go and discuss new mutations and things we were discovering about those mutations. And I met Ben Morrill, my business partner, who we all affectionately know as Dr. Ben, right? We've been friends for 22, 23, 24 years, somewhere in there. And about 14 years ago, when he was still very adamant in breeding not ball pythons, carpet pythons, before he became a ball python guy, I'm like, hey man, if I drive up there to Tinley and you drive from where you live in Virginia, let's get a table together. So we went and met for the first time ever, even though we'd been friends for well over a decade, at that point, and worked a table. And just over the course of the weekend, he had just gotten his doctorate the year before. And I was asking him pretty simple questions, and you guys as vets knows, but you've been able to do sex determination on parrots and things for 35 years. For a long time, right? And so it just seemed odd to me that we couldn't do any sort of sex determination testing. Sorry, my puppy.
We got a cat over here. Yeah.
Just ran downstairs. Yes, Lita, I see you. She's only 4 months old and she already weighs 50 pounds. So.
She's a big girl. Yeah. Holy cow.
She's a Presa Canario. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Grab her, please. She just jumped. I know. She jumps the gate because she's so big.
We'll have to look at it, do an interview in a year and see how she takes up the screen at that point.
Go with Cameron, silly girl.
We can do an interview in a week.
She's growing per day.
Sorry, she really does. We actually got her from Yeti at Yeti Morphs.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Expresses too. And so we got her from him a few months ago. So she's a great dog, but as big as she is, at 4.5 months, she has no manners. So she just jumps over every baby.
I can hear the tail.
I can hear it slapping.
Like a demolition
tail. So do you want me to kind of start over?
No, you just keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, Ben and I were talking at the show about how you can't get any sort of genetic testing on reptiles, and I thought that was odd, and I just said, why is this that difficult, and particularly green tree pythons? That was really what I was talking about the most back then. Why can't we do sex determination on these snakes? It just doesn't make sense to me. And the answer was very simple: nobody's done the work, and it's going to take time and money. And when I asked how much money, he was like, probably a few $1 million. And I was like, whoa, yeah, that's a little bit out of the budget. But that's because back then, going on a decade and a half now, sequencing was a lot more expensive. But over the years, it's come down significantly. And what used to cost $100,000, 10, 12 years ago is now $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, depending on what you're having run. So it's just a lot more affordable to do the research now. So back then, Ben had a full-time job working in human genomics and making a lot of money. He had just gotten his doctorate, so his family was very young at that point. And I didn't think taking him away at that time made any sense, but put him on the payroll, and we just been chipping away at it nights and weekends for years. And about 6 years ago, we figured out colubrid testing. We can do sex determination on those colubrids, and that's how we launched. But we didn't really make a big marketing hoo-yah out of it. We just sort of on the down low started letting people know that we could do some sex determination. And we didn't even have a website for years because that really wasn't the direction we wanted to go, is to launch with just colubrid sex. We wanted to have a breadth of offerings. So anyway, that's how it started. And here we are today. So
it's kind of neat to hear y'all starting small and kind of doing the slow launch.
Yeah.
And, sneaking in.
Sneak launch.
Really did start it at Tinley 14 years ago. That's where the idea came up.
Wow.
That's neat.
That's pretty cool though. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that there should be like an anniversary cake or something every year at Tinley that we could
actually, I didn't go this year. I try to go to every year just to kind of sort of celebrate it with Ben, but we've been traveling to shows so much this year.
Yeah, y'all been very busy.
We just kind of petered or cut back on the budget a little bit. And I said, look, there's no need for us to both be there. Why don't you go? And but we can do more shows if we split it. If we try to go to all the shows together, then we'd end up doing half the shows. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's smart. So speaking of like your strategies, over the years, how has your business strategy changed as far as ads go? Like, Google, Instagram, Facebook, in-person shows, word of mouth. What's your go-to strategy? Like, let's pick a range, like 5 years ago compared to now.
I mean, the reason that Ben and I partnered up is Ben is obviously the science nerd, and I'm the business guy. My business background is I worked in professional sales for about 10 years before I became an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur now for 20 plus years. I've owned my own businesses, 4 or 5 of them over the years. All of them have been successful at one level or another and ultimately sold. I guess with RGI, when we first started, we knew it was sort of a hobby business. And when our initial marketing plan wasn't big, we didn't even have a website. All we wanted was a good logo that people could remember. So
Yeah.
the RGI logo, which everybody's familiar with today, we've actually had for about 4.5, 5 years.
Okay.
And we've just sort of been sitting on it until we launched. And one of the recommendations I wanted to talk to people about, and that a lot of people don't really know, is that much like tattoos, which I also have many of, you can go to multiple like crowdsourcing sites and put up a bid, say, look, I have a project and I'm willing to pay $500 for the best logo. And depending on how you set it up, and some of the sites are like Logo, what is it? I saved them here. Oh, Design Crowd is one of them. I think it's 99 Designs is the other. And these are essentially contest sites, right? You create a contest to create a logo for you. You tell people what you're looking for, and the person that you select as the winner wins however much money you decide to put up. And I think when we did it years ago, it was $350. So depending on how much you can put up, you might get a few submissions to hundreds and hundreds of submissions.
Wow.
And we got 200 or 300 submissions, lots and lots of really bad logos, but eight or 10 that were really good. And Ben and I ultimately decided on the one that we use today. And I think the total cost for it was $500. And I know that seems expensive, but when you're talking about what is the one thing that people are going to think about when you're out there and you're throwing out your business card and you're marketing your YouTube show or you're running an ad somewhere, you have to have a logo that people will look at and remember.
That stamp. Yeah.
Right. And so that worked for us. And for me, it just seemed like a really small price to pay. And honestly, all of my tattoos all over me have also been crowdsourced like that. So I've been
that's a good idea, actually.
I've been doing it for years. And when I've had ideas for different tattoos, I've sent it out there to different artists and said, whoever wins the design wins the money. And then I'll take that design and go actually have it done. So that's really where it came from. But that's the one thing I would recommend to people is a logo is not something to mess around with. Even when you're first starting, you need to decide on a logo that you're going to like and try to stick with it if you can without making too many changes. And if it means you need to spend a little bit of money to do it the right way and get a lot of different options, I would do that. I'm not a big fan of hiring a guy to do a logo for you. I'm not, because there is so much artistic talent out there that can be leveraged on the internet. To not do that just seems like a waste.
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true. With how like you started advertising or marketing the business, how do you see that shifting, or how have you seen it shift? Like, are you Instagram versus Facebook, moving into sponsorships and, Google ads, AI integration, anything like that? Like how is that morphing at this point?
So we have kind of officially been in the ball python mutation and like officially launching RGI as a real company 2 years October. So we're 25 months in right now. We started with our logo and handing out t-shirts at Tinley in October 2 years ago. That's literally how we started. The website wasn't finished yet. Ben and I got like 500 t-shirts made and walked around the show all weekend with armloads of t-shirts and just walked up to tables and said, here's things that we can do. Please take a free shirt, wear them when you can, and give us a call when you have, a genetic testing need, and we'll see what we can do for you. And over time, that's evolved relatively quickly. We still don't do a lot of Google advertising or anything like that because our customers are so finite, that it's a very small niche that you would end up paying for a lot of ads, I think, that wouldn't do you a lot of good in other places. So, we're a lot more direct targeted in what we try to do. We really try to, with our marketing in particular, the YouTube show speaks directly to the science nerds. I mean, Ben's the face of the company because he's a scientist, and our show, we're talking about the science behind what we do every week. And, people like that. And it's a niche that not a lot of other people talk about. So we like being in the forefront, and with Ben having the doctorate and the skill set, he can dive deep. I mean, deeper than even I understand sometimes. So I learn often from that show as well. But I'm also one of those guys that's old enough to know that I'm not great with social media. So we got smart.
We're on the edge. We're on the edge with you there.
we got smart about a little over a year in to bring Kayla on board. Kayla does the YouTube show with Ben every week. And she's kind of our secret weapon when it comes to creating the ads and the kind of interest on the Instagram page, the Facebook page, on our YouTube channel. Anytime we needed any sort of, of ad created, she creates it through no direction from us. Every day or two, she's coming up with some sort of interesting post just to keep people interested in what we're doing. Sometimes it's something silly and goofy. Other times it's, a serious contest or some things like that. So we've really tried to focus our marketing in our first year directly to the hobby, but we've actually gotten even more specific in the last year. We worry less about breeders now, and this is going to sound terrible, but I don't mean it to sound that way, because I really enjoy doing business for all of the big breeders. But the real customer base, I think, for us is the end user, the pet person, right? There's so many people are buying these animals and they don't know the difference between an incomplete dominant and recessive. I can't tell you, how many people that I've spoken to that will ask me silly questions like, how is it possible that you have a het yellow belly? And, I just think that our ability to educate a lot of those pet customers, those end users, for lack of a better term, has really been our strength. And we've been marketing directly to those people. We already have relationships with a lot of the breeders, and they know we're here and they know we can help them, and they know we can do bulk orders and discounts. But it's the customers who we think are keeping the breeders honest. They're the ones that are going to be buying our tests one or two at a time to verify what they purchased. And, they learn a little bit along the way. And I think that's great for the hobby as a whole. So really this last year, our marketing shifted heavily towards the end user and away from the breeders and more to the customers, the breeders' customers, you guys' customers, the folks you end up selling to. So
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a bigger base.
When you look back, so you talk about a few years ago when y'all started off with the colubrid testing, and then now y'all are where y'all are today. I guess did you see it get to this point? What did you think? Did you see it getting this big?
When we originally thought about the business, I was stuck on the sex determination thing. I thought sex determination was going to be the thing that if we could get it across all these different species, that it would be the driver of our business. But when we found out we could do some mutation testing, that really turned out to be the driver.
That kind of changed the flow, I guess.
Yeah. And that's not to say that won't change, but when Ben decided to leave his full-time job and do this full-time, we had to go where the money was so that we could not just pay his salary, but continue to pay for research. So now it's mostly mutation testing, although we do plan on doing more sex determination testing. There are several things that we probably could have done by now, but it's a much smaller segment of the market. We're trying to service the bigger segments of the market first as best we can. So that's really the answer to that question. Is I thought it was just going to be green tree python sexing, colubrids, all the boas and pythons, and being a hobbyist and seeing that all of these tests existed in birds and things, I thought it was going to be relatively easy. And what we've both learned is that that's not the case. All of these animals are very different from each other. Morelia in particular is a really good example of that. It's a highly complicated sex determination process that we're not sure we'll ever have a single gene test for.
It sounds super complicated from the times that I've listened, and then I've read up on it too. I'm like, well, that's just so unique in itself, and there's just not really a lot of data back there to kind of help dig out of that. What was the first morph that triggered that whole move into morphs? Like, what was that?
Well, the work had been done by Dr. Hannah Seidel. She'd done a few albino, lab albino. I think the Canadian group or someone up there had done a paper on pied. If I'm not mistaken, Ben would be better for that. We found clown. So we started with 6 tests right out of the gate, 2 of which were ours, 4 of which were people's tests that they had published, but nobody was really selling them to the industry. Nobody was
Yeah,
really,
that makes sense.
you could send tests into Dr. Sedell at that time to get a free result, but it would often take 6 months to a year because it was going to the university and her students, and it was just part of a
Graduate program or something.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
A graduate program or something along. We're the people that commercialized it and said, hey, see, back then it was $65 for a single gene test. And that's what started with the hopes and dreams of hitting 60 to 75 tests in our first year, and we didn't get anywhere near that. So
that's a lot of work. I mean, you have to think about all that has to go into like making sure it is a percentage, of quality coming back, the confidence and there's always errors and things. And so then being able to figure out, all those peaks and stuff on the sequencing and everything.
Right.
So and I don't think a lot of people understand it in depth. And so they get impatient with it. It's like, you don't really know, you have to sit down and really analyze this stuff. It's pretty intense to be able to pluck that out of what we've created with some of these mass gene,
right. Well, and two things really slowed us down. Towards about halfway through the first year, 3/4 of the way through the first year, we made a conscious decision. We actually polled the customer base, the industry, and said, what would you guys prefer, more research or faster turnaround time on tests? Because in the beginning, we were sequencing everything, which meant that the return time on a test could be 3 to 6 weeks. But the beauty behind that is we could take our paid tests and our research runs and do them all at the same time because it's all the same process. So although it was a little bit slower on the customer service side, it made research runs a lot more affordable, a lot cheaper, and we were getting a lot more work done. But the hobby spoke and said, no, we want fast results. That's really what happened. So the first thing we did is we stopped research for a few months and changed everything. We changed the lab, we bought all new equipment, and we turned all of our tests into what we call the fast test now, FASSSST. That's Ben's idea. Anyway, the fast tests are 1 to 2 business days now. So if we get a shed today, I should have a result for you by tomorrow night. That's typically how that goes. And that's been great. And it's been received really well. However, that slows our research down because now we can't sequence as often as we used to, because a sequencing run costs me the same amount of money, whether it's 10 samples or 600 samples. It's all the same. So and we have to
batch it. Yeah. You want to do a big batch just for the company's sake. And so then that takes time to accumulate if that's not where the process is going. So it does make a lot of sense, but it sounds like y'all have allowed customers, breeders, customers, everybody to help, influence the direction of where the business is going.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we live in a society where everybody wants everything right now. Right? That's absolutely, it didn't surprise me that was everyone's reaction, and that's why we changed direction. But unfortunately, it slows the research down because now we don't fill plates as quickly for sequencing as we used to, and so it takes us longer in between sequence rounds, which means we get less data back, and unfortunately the testing development just takes longer now. So that's the trade-off that I think a lot of people should understand about our business is, we did really trade faster test development for faster test results. The other thing that affected us a lot is where was I going with this? Oh, we're hobbyists, right? Ben and I have been breeding snakes forever, and we thought this was all going to be simple like everybody else. We thought, hey, albino is just going to be albino, and yellow belly is just going to be yellow belly, and there'll be a single gene test for every mutation. And so getting to 65 or 75 tests at the end of the year should be no problem. Well, that's not really how any of this works at all. What we've discovered is about 1 in 3 now of these genes has a secondary mutation that does exactly the same thing, that's on the same gene, right? So our research has slowed down, but that's because a lot of our research now is having to find secondary and sometimes even 3rd or 4th mutations that cause the same thing to happen. So, when someone orders, a yellow belly test, we actually run 2. When someone orders a, ultramel test, we actually have to run 2 tests. And there are multiple mutations where we do this. And so I say we only have 45 mutation tests available right now, and that's true. And we hope to have about 50 by the end of the year. But the reality is we have about 67 that we have developed now to service the industry. But a good percentage of them are just multiple mutations of the same gene that cause the same thing. And in order to give someone a correct and accurate answer, we have to have both of those, or sometimes all three. Albino is 3 different mutations that are compatible.
I was gonna say albino. I knew it was at least 2, but I didn't realize there was a third one. So
Special looks like it's going to be 3, maybe 4. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
that's crazy, isn't it? And it's funny because it's like they're still compatible, but it's still, this whole different gene
Mhm.
marker that has to be read and then be able to be analyzed. And so it does get way more complicated. We really don't probably completely understand what we're doing right now as far as
It's all brand new science for sure. It's all brand new. It's a lot of fun, but it's all
It's
brand
cool
new.
though. It fascinates me, and I could sit and probably pick Ben's brain for hours. He'd drive him crazy, but one day I'm gonna get him on, and it's gonna be me and him just dorking out.
You better be careful. You'll be on there for hours.
Marketing and business minded things are where we're at the moment, because that's where we're the weakest. And you did give some kind of like suggestions about logos and things. Like, do you have other suggestions about marketing as more of like a people like us? Where would you want to see a person trying to like advertise their business at this point?
I mean, again, let's keep it reptile specific, because I think that those answers change depending on the industry that you're in. I own some service businesses, and those businesses are nothing like what we do, right? So there's a lot of pay-per-click sort of Google ads advertising for those other businesses, but I don't think that that's the sort of thing that works for us. I think what works for us in our kind of micro pet industry, which is really what we are, is a lot of the social media stuff, staying in touch with your customer base, telling a story about your company. And there are mistakes that you can avoid while doing that. Again, Ben and I are hobbyists. In the very beginning, we made some mistakes on social media. We started sharing a lot of things before we 100% knew what was going on, because we were excited and geeking out about it and wanted to share it because we thought everybody else would get excited and geek out about it. And unfortunately, a decent portion of the hobby doesn't geek out about it. They freak out about it.
They freak out about it.
Forget and all of these other things. So now we really don't talk about a lot of things until we know 100% that we're right. But we have so many things that we think we know is going on, and we'd really like to talk about it socially and share it with all these people. And unfortunately, we've learned that's not. So I think the next thing I would say is that if you're going to use social media for marketing, is be careful what you talk about. If you're just selling widgets, that's easy, right? But if you're doing something like that can affect the market as a whole, you need to make sure that you're careful with what you're releasing and what you're talking about and how you market it. And that was a kind of a painful lesson we learned. And you can see a distinct difference in what we used to talk about on our shows, 15, 16 months ago versus now. You can see a distinct difference in the ads that we run. And when I say ads, they're really just social media posts that we do now versus what we used to do, because we're just much more holding cards a lot closer to the chest. And that's not to protect our business, really. I think we've just learned it's to protect the market as a whole. So
that makes sense.
So this question is going to kind of flip it back, kind of like that one, towards us a little bit as keepers. Over the years, you see a lot of keepers, hobby people come and go. What seems to be something that helps people outlast others? What characteristics would you say those keepers possess?
So, I mean, it sounds a little corny, but there's a couple things. The first one is you really do have to enjoy this. I like what I do. If I could do this full time, and RGI is not yet where I can, Ben can, but I can't, I would sell all of my other businesses and do this full time. I love it. I think it's great. I like going to shows. I like talking about what we do. I like talking about things that we've discovered. And if we don't talk about it on YouTube shows, that's one thing. But if you come talk to me in a show, I'll tell you everything, because I love to talk about it, right? So you really do if you're getting into this business because you think you're going to make a whole bunch of money, but you don't really like what you're doing, you don't like cleaning cages, you don't like turning your music on and being out there in a snake room by yourself for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time, once or twice a week, you should probably reconsider, because you have to kind of be passionate about it, because people will see through that over time, and eventually you're not going to last. You're going to get tired of it and sell because you just don't want to do it anymore, or you're going to get tired of it and people are going to get tired of you because they can tell it's not your thing, and they're not going to buy from you because they don't trust you. That's the first thing. The other thing, honestly, is if you are not good at managing money, you really should not get into this business.
Yeah, because it's easy to lose it.
It's very easy to come into this, particularly ball pythons, but some other stuff too, and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have it, only to turn around and lose every bit of it because you bought all the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
If you're just buying things because they're beautiful and they're cool and you think you're going to make a bunch of money just by buying random things, and you don't have a plan for how you're going to spend your money and what the return on the investment should be on those plans before you buy your first snake, you're making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake.
And that's where I agree wholly, completely with that. I mean, as far as seeing people come in and just, you do want to get stuff that you like. I've told people that you do want to pick out the things you like, but there needs to be a focus long term. And I remember when we first got into this, I remember my breeding plans were these two together and I'm going to get this. And then it stopped. And it's like now, one layer. And that's short game in my mind looking back now. But then now it's changed over time. And now I make pairings that then the babies, then like the great grandbabies, like I'm looking at like, what can we make 10 years from now? And I think that seeing that in the future and then having a plan of action keeps you focused too, also on your projects, and keeps you from hopefully derailing and grabbing just random stuff outside of it. And, I think that has changed for us, at least over the last few years, especially with the ball pythons.
I'm going to showing dogs for a long time. And, working 3 or 4 generations of dogs is no big deal. Everybody usually makes stuff that far. When you can do decades worth of breeding plans, that's when it gets, and you still enjoy it that far in, that's when it does get more fun.
Yeah. I'm going to steal this from Troy Woodruff with Balls and Strikes, because he just told me this at St. Louis this weekend. I never really thought about it this way, but it just speaks to what we're all talking about right now. And I think, I think it was Tim who told him this many years ago, because it really sunk in with Troy, and you can tell in his business and in the projects that he works now as a ball python breeder. If you're buying other people's high-end animals and breeding them to sell all of the babies, you're not a ball python breeder. You're somebody who buys other people's projects, breeds them, and then sells the babies. If you are buying animals to build your own projects to sell to those people, now you're a ball python breeder.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to get perspective of it, and make sense of it.
If you have a plan to become unique in some way as a breeder, and the animals that you produce in particular, the certain people like Ozzy with Orange Dream stuff have built a I don't want to say a market for themselves, but an image for themselves, a niche for themselves in the market, that people are like, oh, well, you want that stuff? Go to this guy. You want that stuff?
Let's go there. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Have a plan, or you will spend lots and lots of money, and you will burn out and end up not selling a bunch of animals. You'll end up going down the wrong path and producing a bunch of animals that no one wants, or very low dollar. Now, the flip side of that coin is, and I've been saying this for 30 years, as long as I was on the Morelia Python forums, if you're a hobbyist who just likes breeding snakes and you don't ever plan on making a business of it, but you can have 8 or 10 clutches a year, go to your local shows and sell the animals, or thankfully through sites like Morph Market now, you can sell them online too, right? I can't think of any Wall Street investor that would look at what you were doing and say, I wish I could get that, or that's ridiculous. They're not going to say that. What they will say is, I wish I could get that kind of return on what I'm doing.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
That this is a hobby, and that you're going to spend a few hundred to maybe several $1,000s on animals, but you'll be able to get a return on the investment every single year for something that you enjoy doing. How many hobbies do we all have that you can actually make money at?
Not many.
I tell people that at work all the time, like, you can't rub your rifles together and make more rifles. Like,
right.
That's a one-way street. Yeah. It's a fun hobby too. But
playing golf, it's all to tee fees and stuff, like green fees and stuff like that. It's gone. I mean, until you're in that next level, which very few people get to that point. And so I think that's very different.
What are you? Are you going to become a ball python breeder? Then spend some money and have a plan and execute the plan, and maybe change the plan year over year. But if you're not going to be a breeder and you're just going to be a hobbyist, that's okay too. Yeah, you're going to make some money. You're going to have a great time, and you're probably not going to lose money unless something catastrophic happens. I love motorcycles and all kinds of, I love to hunt. So I have lots of guns and bows and that's all setting. I love to scuba dive, all of these
Yep.
things I love to do, but it's all sets things on fire. Right. So it, it is what it is. So,
It is what it is.
that when you get into any sort of animal breeding, but reptiles in particular, it's one of those things where the ROI on the hobby is fantastic.
Yeah, it
So
is.
don't run away thinking you're not going to make any money, but don't go into a business and quit your day job thinking you're going to make a lot of money without an actual real business plan, because you're going to fold very quickly.
And that's great advice and a very good perspective, because I think a lot of people confuse the two things, hobby versus business. And, it should be two different routes mentally.
Right.
And not to say that a hobbyist couldn't all of a sudden surprisingly be in the business realm. And you can still have a hobby of loving to do this and then turn it into a business if you have the business mindset. And we've had that switch flipped this year. We earlier this year, I mean, literally at the beginning of this year, we talked about staying neutral. Basically what goes in comes back out. All of our reptile money, stays within itself. And things changed, and now it's not, it's not like it's a forced business, but there has been a little bit of a push now of going into a business situation, taking over Tom's collection. We're not taking over it, we are taking care of it.
Yeah.
Sarah owns the business, and so we're now working for her in a sense, taking care of the animals and then selling them. And so we've had to come up with a new strategy as far as business minded. I think that's pushed us to try to learn, better, to be better business people, so that we can make sure we work well for her, I guess is one way to look at it. So
We've got a family legacy to uphold, so that gives us plenty of fire, plenty of
For sure.
drive. Heartburn, some people call that.
sleepless nights.
But Dad gave us that torch, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We had a big show with him. We kind of looked at each other like, we
This
like
is
this.
fun.
Light
Yeah.
bulbs are going off.
Yeah.
We've made such good friends in the industry too. So it's been kind of a surprising change over the last several years, and we love it. And so I feel like we're in the right spot, and now we're just having to learn some different avenues to make sure that we do make the business side of it work. And so,
Can I ask you guys a question?
Oh yes, definitely.
Any of the projects that you've taken over in Tom's collection that seriously interests you guys, just as like a personal, like, this is important to me because either you like it or because it was something that was really important to Tom and you want to kind of continue to push forward? Any in particular projects? Or
Well, the Monarch was already something that we were working on, just on a little bit lower level than Tom.
We were sneaking into it.
and we had actually bought a couple of investment animals outside of Tom's collection that had some other genes in it, because we wanted to add some of our own spice to it. And we definitely are working the Monarch, and there will be Tom specific things that we know he wanted. Like, he told us specific things he was hoping to see. So we will keep following that track. There'll be our track that we had already started thinking of. And then already there is a pairing that we've talked about, and it's going to end up being a combined. It's going to be
hybrid.
one of our investment males to one of his, big time girls that we found looking through the two collections. This is going to be the best route long term for that particular breeding.
On the ball python side, definitely Monarch. We definitely want to mess with as much of that as possible. And on the hognose side, we had kind of paired up with that on the Swiss chocolate.
Yeah. We'd already been working with him with that for over 3 years now. And so that was already kind of something that we built on together. And then being able to carry that together now with what he has, what we have. We're definitely going to have 2 tracks that we're going to run separate, but there'll be a lot of crossover going on over the next few years. We want to keep his like solar flare, hognose, and those lines pretty pure. But there's going to be some little coalitions, I guess.
I'm excited to see where all that goes. I really am. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah. Any other questions for us?
Off the top of my head, I don't think so. I know you guys are just getting into marketing via some of the social media, like what we're doing right now. Are you guys enjoying it? Because I enjoy doing them on a limited basis. I know Ben really enjoys doing it, and Kayla really enjoys doing it. I don't know that I have the stamina to be in front of a camera once a week like they do, right? So I like doing the lives once a quarter and answering some of the big questions, but
we've really enjoyed doing a lot of these, and we've been able to be on several podcasts over the last couple of years, and we really liked it. And I think this week, because we jumped into this like literally, let's do that. We thought of this last week and like, let's do this.
We were scared of this big monster thing because we don't want to screw it up. We're perfectionists. And now that we've clicked the buttons a few times and done it, we're like, okay, this is not that bad.
And it's fun talking to people that we're friends with anyway, and kind of connecting in a different area and kind of helping us. We're learning doing this, and
we're not like Stephen Capp's quality yet. We're working on that.
No, I don't know if we'll ever to be near his level. He's got that down pat, but we are enjoying it. So I don't see us being like the weekly, Proper Royals or one of those guys, but I think maybe even once in a blue moon we'll have a live here and there. But mainly we're wanting to do pre-recordeds to be able to release them for educational purposes.
Gotcha. Well, we talked a little bit about this offline, and it may be a good way to just sort of close sort of what we're talking about, whether it comes to marketing or anything. In your business, not so much your hobby, I guess, if that's all this is for you is a hobby, and that's great. But if this really becomes a business, I guess my last piece of advice would just be smart enough to know what you're not good at and try not to be good at it.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask somebody or hire somebody that you know is good at something. Yeah. Kayla in our company is a really good example of that. If that had been left up to me or Ben, it would be a mess. And Kayla makes it look easy because she's very good at it, right? And
does she have a sister in East Tennessee?
Does she need a side gig or something?
Well, I'm good at what I'm good at, and Ben's good at what he's good at, and Kayla's great at what he's great at, and we have another employee, Allie. She's fantastic in the lab, right? So we're very lucky in our company that we've managed to find the.
That's true.
Could I do several more of those jobs and maybe spend less money as a company? Yep. But I think that would be a mistake as a business owner. I really do think that things work better when we have the right people in the right places. And so the last thing I would say is if you're not good at something, that's okay. Nobody's great at everything. Focus on what you're good at and find somebody to help you with the stuff that you're not. That's perfectly okay.
I like that advice. I think we'll probably end up running with that. And I think we're going to keep looking for somebody that can help us do some of this. It's not our strong suit, but we also want to learn it so that we can at least understand it as a team, in that sense. But it's been awesome having you here.
Yeah, man. So, thanks for your time.
It's no problem. I look at my life and I wonder often how I ended up here, right? Like I talked earlier about how I used to be kind of an importer guy when that's all there was. And now I'm, working with Ben and doing all of this high-end genetics work. And I do not have a background in any of it other than I just love the hobby and I love the animals. And so it's really cool to be here and really rewarding, and, stick with it, guys. Cause if you're passionate about it and you spend the decades like I have, even if it's behind the scenes, eventually some stuff works out. It just does. So I've been very blessed, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. We appreciate so much of your time. Thanks, guys.
Right on, guys. Thanks, everybody.